everybody. Thank you for coming and sharing your practice with us on this beautiful evening. And thank you to our guests. It's always nice to have some company to make this feel a little bit more real. So let's take a moment to find our posture and settle in. And before we do that, I wanted to say real briefly that there's a traditional metaphor that's used to describe how we should listen to a talk like this. And usually it's related to kind of a quality of a bowl. That there should be kind of 3 qualities that you should have of your mind that's similar to this bowl. That the bowl shouldn't be dirty, meaning that you shouldn't kind of include perspectives and ideas that aren't included in the talk with kind of what you're hearing, not kind of contaminating it with other things. And that there shouldn't be holes in the bowl, meaning that we're actually present and listening to the information and not letting it just come in one ear and out the other, so that we don't actually receive any information afterwards. And that the bowl should not be upside down, that it should be right side up, ready to receive something, that we're open and willing to hear and sort of consider alternative perspectives. So those are kind of 3 qualities of our mind that's helpful to use in order to listen and make best use of a talk like this. And so with our mind, there are important qualities to consider, but then also with our physical body, there are important qualities to consider in order to utilize those aspects. So just take a moment to inhale and straighten up. And exhale and settle into your body. And so inhaling, straightening up. And exhaling, settling in. Noticing the relationship of your posture on the quality of your mind, your ability to be attentive, to be open to new perspectives, to listen to what's being presented, and to be present. And thank you for taking this opportunity to prepare your mind and prepare your body. If your eyes are closed, you can open them and come back to the room. So today I would like to talk about a certain aspect of the nurture positive technique and the importance of including a nurture positive technique in our standard framework of practice. Now, very often we have techniques that can be utilized to develop our concentration and our focus, and also to deconstruct our sense of self. And often when we think about vipassana or mindfulness or insight practice, a lot of emphasis is really focused on developing deep concentration and also trying to disentangle our sense of self, to deconstruct our sense of self. But very often this type of technique alone, without something to balance it out, can produce results that are undesirable. It can tend to make us a little bit withdrawn, that we're just always focusing on ourselves and always focusing on our own experience. And the qualities of wanting to be of service to the world, to be open and to be more loving to others, can sometimes be left out when we're constantly just focusing on our own experience. And so those techniques are good, and it's good to develop that concentration and develop that insight. But it's also important to balance it with something that gives us a motivation and a context to why we're really doing that practice in the first place. Of a way to relate, to understand what is our motivation for doing that practice? And one potential motivation could be to really be loving and of service to others. That really the point of doing this practice is to enable us to be of service to the world, to be more kind, to be more caring to others, and to do specific practices that remind us that that is a possible motivation and a possible foundation for practice, can help us balance these two aspects of the practice out. And so, in particular, what I want to talk about today is a certain framework of nurture-positive practice, where we are cultivating and nurturing positive states, and really holding our mind on that experience. And that framework is traditionally called the Brahma Viharas, sometimes translated as the divine abodes. And then another translation is the four immeasurables. It's four immeasurable qualities that we try to develop. And included in this framework is something called metta practice, which we often, for some reason, emphasize that one as a loving kindness practice, as sort of the main aspect of these four practices that most people tend to practice. And actually, very often, the metta practice is confused a little bit, and the other aspects of the four immeasurables are included and sort of wrapped up into it, so that almost that one contains the whole framework. But I find that there's a usefulness in understanding the whole framework and how they relate and balance each other out. So the four immeasurables, or the four divine abodes, are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, sometimes translated as sympathetic joy, and then equanimity. And so loving kindness is simply an aspiration that ourselves and others find happiness and the causes of happiness. And one of the things that I want to mention about this is that specifically this practice is in developing an aspiration. It's developing cognition, a state of mind, and not necessarily about developing the emotion of love, which people understand in a lot of different ways and have a lot of different ways that they define the word love and how they relate to the word love. But so this particular practice is cultivating an aspiration or a wish that others be happy and that they find the true causes of happiness. Not so much that we're trying to develop an emotional feeling of love. And that feeling might arise as we do this practice, but the main aspect of it is that we're developing an aspiration. And then compassion practice, in a similar way, is the wish that ourselves and others be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And again, this practice is an aspiration. It's developing this state of mind that is, wishing for others to be free from suffering, and and ourselves included in that aspect of others. Another quality is this quality called empathetic joy, which is taking delight or virtue in the success, or taking delight or appreciating the successes and virtue of others. So really, taking the opportunity to acknowledge other people who are doing great things in this world, really appreciating the good things that they're doing, taking the opportunity to really take delight, to be happy about all of the positive things that are happening. And then finally, this quality of equanimity, which in the context of the four immeasurables is slightly different than the type of equanimity that we talk about in basic mindfulness, which is the ability to allow sensory experience to come and go without push or pull. So this type of equanimity is specifically relating to sensory experience. But the equanimity talked about in this framework of practice really includes the loving kindness, the compassion, the empathetic joy, and then allows us to have equanimity based on the range of people that we are able to apply this practice towards, so that we have an equal sense of loving kindness, compassion, and empathetic joy to ourselves, to our friends and family, people that we love, to complete strangers that we don't know, and even to people who we consider our enemies, or that really challenge us, or that we have difficult situations with. So the sense of equanimity, in this case, is really to break down the barriers of who we're able to actually apply these practices to. And the reason that they're called the four immeasurables, or what makes them immeasurable, is that we're able to have these qualities for immeasurable living beings, breaking down the barriers and having it equally for all people and all living things. So one thing that I think is useful to consider about how these particular practices actually work together to balance each other out is understanding what are the dangers, or the kind of traditionally what's called the near enemy of these practices. And so it's a practice that looks like loving kindness or looks like compassion, but in fact it's not. And actually is a pitfall to kind of fall in that direction. And that these four practices can help avoid these pitfalls and balance each other out when we start to go in a wrong direction with them. So to start, so let's say we have loving kindness. Right? So the near enemy, or the thing that looks like loving kindness but actually isn't, is what we might call self-centered attachment, where really it's not wishing that someone else is happy, but wishing that somebody else do something that'll make you happy. Being able to, be dependent upon other people doing things. Really, it might look like you're being loving and you're being kind, but really your primary motivation for doing that is just so that person will do something that you want them to do that'll make you happy. So it's not really this aspiration or wish that other people will be happy. So if we kind of get off balance with loving kindness and we fall into this sense of self-centered attachment, then the practice of equanimity can help us there. Because it can help us to then break down the barriers of just having loving kindness for ourselves and what we want, but really consider broader circles of people. Or as Renee said a couple of weeks ago, kind of including this spiral of who we can apply this practice to. But sometimes with this sense of equanimity, we can get a sense, so the kind of near enemy of equanimity is this sense of aloof indifference, where it's not an equal love and caring for all people, but it's sort of I equally don't care about anybody. That you are not really taking action to be of service, to be of benefit, to be of value. And then, so in that sense, compassion can kind of come to the rescue. And we can consider the suffering that there is in the world. We can consider that we want to do something about the suffering that's in the world and actually take action to make that better, and see that it's useful to actually be caring and kind and to take action to do things, that there is suffering that can and should be resolved. And so when we find that we have this sense of aloof indifference and we equally don't care about anything, really considering the suffering that's in the world and the desire to do something about it can help to balance that out. But then often, we can have compassion, but there's so much suffering in the world that we can get completely overwhelmed by that experience and just fall into a state of misery and grief that there's all this suffering, I'll never be able to do anything about it, the world is horrible, people just do bad things, and we can really fall into that rut when really getting deep into compassion practice. And then so luckily, this quality of empathetic joy can help balance that it can help us realize that, okay, there is a lot of suffering in the world, but actually there's a lot of great things that are happening in the world. People are doing amazing things. People really are making changes and making the world a better place. And we can actually, take delight in the success of other people, take delight in the people who are making a positive impact and are doing something about this suffering to move it in a positive direction. But then when we do that practice, we can kind of just get into a sense of, a frivolous hedonism, where we're just, only focusing on pleasure, only focusing on taking delight in other people who are doing things, but kind of only focusing on our own happiness and the things that bring us pleasure, and kind of falling into that rut. And then in that sense, loving kindness can help us balance that out, where instead of only taking in our own personal delight and in our own personal pleasure, that we wish that others and that all beings also find that same sense of happiness and also find that same sense of joy. So, traditionally these 4 practices come together as a package. And when they're practiced, they're used to help balance each other out. They're used to help create a motivation for practice. And so when these practices really come to their culmination, where you're really able to have equanimity by having this equally for all beings, there's an aspect of this practice that becomes the great loving kindness and great compassion, where you take personal responsibility for that, where you say, not only is there this aspiration or this wish, but I'm going to make it happen, that I'm really going to take that responsibility. And ultimately that culminates in something that's called bodhicitta, or that Shinzen likes to translate as a spirit of love and service. And it's really a motivation to attain the highest state of awakening or liberation that you can, so that you can be enabled to actually love others and actually be of service to others. And these practices ultimately lead to help develop that motivation that is said to be one of the strongest motivations for practice. And when you have that motivation, when you do this deep concentration and this deep insight practice, you know why you're doing it. It's not necessarily just for yourself and for your own selfish needs and desires, but it's really so that you can, overcome suffering yourself, so that you can help lead others out of that suffering. And so let's take this opportunity to practice this and to see how we can relate to these practices and how it can help us develop our own motivation for why we do this practice. And so finding a comfortable posture, either sitting on a cushion or chair, or you're welcome to be standing. Any posture that's comfortable. So with your eyes open or closed as you like, take a moment to inhale and straighten your spine. And exhale, settle into your posture, settle into your body. And so let's start by practicing loving kindness for ourselves. And so bring to mind an image of yourself. And you can see yourself in your mind. Noticing that with each practice of mindfulness, there's an object of our attention. And in these practices, the object of our attention is living things. That is what we're directing these aspirations to. So bring to your mind an image of a living thing, in particular, yourself. And as you attend to yourself, you can say these words in your mind. May I find happiness and the true causes of happiness. May I find happiness and the true causes of happiness. And allow this to be an aspiration. This wish to truly find happiness and its causes. And direct that aspiration towards this image of yourself. And using whatever wisdom, whatever insight you've gained from other forms of this practice, in order to know from your own experience what actually are the true causes of happiness. It's important for us to clarify what that is. And so develop this aspiration. And then bring to mind a person or a group of people. It might be a family member, a friend, maybe an organization that you're involved in. And so just imagine in your mind someone else or a group of other people. See if you can develop the same aspiration for them. You can say in your mind, may you find happiness and the true causes of happiness. And then considering as much as we would like ourselves and all beings to find true, unconditional happiness, that there is a fair amount of suffering present in this world. So take a moment to just acknowledge that. To acknowledge the fact that there is suffering. And if there is nothing that we could do about this, then it would be a pretty sad situation. But luckily the claim is that there is something that we can do. And if we're here, then maybe we have some sense that that's true. And so at this point, bring to mind an image of a person who you consider an enemy. Someone that you have a struggle with, someone that challenges you, someone that maybe engages in behaviors or actions that you think are unethical or create suffering for others. And just consider that this person is not a bad person, is not inherently your enemy. Is simply engaged in actions or behaviors that you don't like. And so see if you can develop the aspiration that may this person be free from suffering and be free from the causes of suffering. So their own habits, their own patterns that make them engage in these actions that we don't like, that challenge us. Notice that in yourself, that you also have certain habits or patterns that maybe you'd like to change. Suffering that you'd like to be free of. So just like yourself, this is true of this person that challenges you. And so develop the aspiration that they may be free from that suffering and from the causes of that suffering, that they know what is causing that, and that they're able to do something about it. And so picturing this individual in your mind, developing this aspiration. And then finally recognizing that as much suffering as is present in the world, and it's important to acknowledge and develop a motivation to do something about it, there's actually quite a bit of virtue, of positive actions that are being done every day. And so take a moment to bring to mind someone who really inspires you. Someone who's engaging in actions that you would like to engage in. Someone who's actually doing something to try to relieve some suffering in the world. And then take a moment to take delight in that activity. To appreciate those actions, to value and respect them. And so this practice does have more of an affective feel to it. So we're actually taking delight, we're generating an emotional body sensation. We're feeling good about the positive things that are being done in the world. Finally, with whatever extent you're able to with your imagination, picturing all beings, all living things, surrounding you in all directions. And develop this aspiration that all beings find unconditional happiness and know the causes that lead to that unconditional happiness. And that all beings be free from suffering. And that they actually have the wisdom to know what is causing that suffering, so that they can be free from it. And to whatever extent you're able to or would like to, see if you can connect to this as a motivation for your practice. So that the reason to deepen our concentration, the reason to deepen our insight, so that we're actually able to take responsibility for these aspirations. To take action in the world.